help with a wonderful emoji at the end of it. I suppose we're looking at it from pregnancy through to the age of 5, so through to children starting school.
A long-lost relic of the Windsor dynasty has surfaced from the deepest recesses of the royal archives, and its path to the Princess of Wales is sending shockwaves through the palace. Once thought to be a casualty of historical clearance, this rediscovered piece of history has been placed directly into Catherine's custody by a surprise administrative decree. While the palace frames it as a routine archival recovery, those in the inner circles know the truth. This is a powerful symbolic transfer of authority that leaves Queen Camilla's camp in a state of absolute silence. The discovery in the vaults. The basement level of the royal archives is a place of dust and shadows. It is where the forgotten pieces of history go to rest. Last Tuesday, a junior archivist was performing a standard sweep of the late Queen's private estate boxes. He was moving a stack of heavy, leather-bound folders from the late 1950s. Behind the stack, tucked against a damp stone wall, he found a small, unmarked crate wrapped in oilcloth. It did not look like it belonged in the main inventory. He opened the crate on a wooden workbench under a harsh fluorescent light. Inside, resting on a bed of decaying velvet, was a silver casket inlaid with sapphires. It was a piece of jewelry that had not been seen by the public for over 60 years. Records indicated it had been listed as disposed of or lost during the inventory clearance of 1964. It was supposed to be gone. Instead, it was here, sitting in the basement. The archivist immediately called his supervisor. Within 1 hour, the piece was transported to a secure room in the main palace complex. The king was notified before the end of the day. He did not ask for the item to be put into the general collection. He issued a verbal order for the casket to be cleaned, catalogued, and then personally delivered to the office of the Princess of Wales. It was a direct, unusual intervention. Most royal items follow a strict path when they are rediscovered. They go through a verification process. They are analyzed by experts to determine their provenance. They are then placed in the official royal registry. This item skipped that entire process. It was fast-tracked. It was essentially handed to Catherine as if it were a private inheritance rather than a piece of state property. The staff at Clarence House did not know about the discovery until Friday. They learned about it when the official courier arrived at the princess's office with the secure transport case. There was no memo. There was no advance notice to the Queen's team. The discovery had been kept entirely within the inner circle of the king's household. It was a move of surgical precision. This item was not just a piece of silver. It was a relic of the early reign of the late Queen. It was a symbol of that era's prestige. By returning it to the light of day, the king was bringing a piece of the past into the present. By choosing to give it to Catherine, he was making a statement about who he trusts to carry that past into the future. It was a gesture that spoke louder than any public speech. The mystery that began to circulate among the palace staff was simple. Why this, and why now? If the item had been sitting in that basement for over 60 years, why did it have to be found this week? And if it was found, why was it immediately transferred to the Princess of Wales? The timing felt deliberate. It felt like the result of a long, quiet search that had finally reached its goal. Rumors started to build that the king had been searching for this specific casket since his own coronation. He had heard stories of it from his mother, but he had never seen it. Finding it was a personal triumph. Handing it to Catherine was an act of transition. He was not just giving her a piece of jewelry, he was giving her a piece of the royal identity. He was anchoring her future to the history of the one who came before. The Queen's advisors were left to speculate from the outside. They had not been invited to the viewing. They had not been consulted on the cataloging. They were witnessing a major transfer of assets without any official briefing. They felt like outsiders in their own home. They were watching the king reorganize the hierarchy of the family, and they were not part of the plan. This discovery has changed the mood in the palace. It has moved from a quiet, internal rivalry to a visible, symbolic competition. Catherine has been given a piece of history that defines her as the next chapter. The Queen's camp is silent, but they are watching closely. They know that this is just the beginning. The vaults are still full of shadows, and the king seems determined to bring the rest of the past into the light. A symbol of sovereignty. Catherine sat at her desk on Wednesday morning. The silver casket sat in front of her. It was not hidden in a safe. It was right there, catching the sunlight from the window. It felt heavy with history. This was not merely a trinket for a royal jewelry box. It was the coronation casket used by the late Queen during the Commonwealth tours of 1954. It was a physical representation of the bond between the crown and the member nations. The casket was designed to carry the official seals of the Commonwealth. It was a tool of statecraft. In the 50s, it was the symbol of a new era. It signaled that the monarchy was evolving to meet a global audience. For Catherine to have this now is a massive symbolic weight. It suggests she is the one chosen to maintain those same global ties. She is being framed as the steward of the institution's reach. The Queen's staff heard about the casket through the internal grapevine. They were baffled. They had expected such a significant historical item to be placed in the permanent royal collection or displayed at the Tower of London. To see it quietly delivered to the Princess of Wales felt like a strategic move. It was not about protecting the item. It was about defining the future. It gave Catherine a historical claim that the Queen simply does not possess. The King's message is unmistakable. He is not just giving her a piece of property. He is giving her the authority of the previous reign. He is telling the Commonwealth and the public that the continuity of the monarchy flows through her. It is a subtle but sharp departure from the current arrangement. By choosing Catherine over his own wife, the king has bypassed the usual path of inheritance. He is shaping the line of succession through historical symbols. There is a mystery here that the palace corridors are buzzing about. Why now? The king has had years to redistribute royal items. Many have been moved or reassigned since he took the throne. Yet, this specific piece remained lost until the exact moment Catherine's role started to expand. Some say the king waited for the right moment to release it. He wanted to use it to bolster her standing at the precise time the public was beginning to see her as a leader. This move resolves the question of who holds the moral authority of the late queen. By holding the casket, Catherine holds the physical proof of the past. She is not just a modern royal, she is a historical one. The Queen's team feels this in their bones. They know that no amount of charity work or official visits can compete with a tangible link to the golden age of the monarchy. They are fighting for the present, while Catherine is being given the keys to the past. But this discovery opens a new, more dangerous mystery. If the king is willing to reach into the archives and pull out lost treasures to legitimize Catherine's rise, what else is hidden in those vaults? What other symbols of power are waiting to be found? The palace is now in a state of quiet agitation. The staff, from the highest levels to the lowest, are waiting for the next crate to be opened. They are wondering what piece of history will be used to reshape the hierarchy next. Catherine herself has said nothing about the casket. She has not worn it. She has not mentioned it in her public engagements. She is acting with her usual discipline. She knows the power of the object. She knows that by simply having it in her possession, she changes the dynamic of the entire household. She does not need to show it off. The mere fact that it is in her office is enough to send a message. The king has effectively drawn a line in the sand. He has used a piece of silver to define the next generation of leadership. For the Queen's camp, it is a sign that the walls are closing in. They are watching a process they cannot stop. They are watching a history they were supposed to protect being handed to someone else. The silver casket is the first piece of the puzzle. Everyone is now waiting to see what happens when the second piece is found. The silent transfer. The logistics of the transfer were handled in the dead of night. At 2 a.m. on Thursday, a plain black sedan pulled into the service entrance of Kensington Palace. There were no flashing lights and no security escort. A single staff member from the King's private office stepped out. He was carrying a padded transport case. He did not sign a register. He simply handed the case to Catherine's personal assistant and left. It was a transaction that took less than 3 minutes. By the time the sun came up, the silver casket was already secured in Catherine's private suite. It was documented as a private loan for study within her personal inventory logs. This specific classification was the key. It bypassed the public registry entirely. By treating the item as a temporary private loan, the King's office ensured that the move would not appear on any of the public lists of royal assets. It was a masterclass in bureaucratic silence. The Queen's camp did not suspect a thing. They were busy preparing for the Friday briefing. Their focus was on the upcoming gardening initiative and the budget adjustments for the late summer tour. They assumed that if anything significant had been moved from the archives, they would have been the first to know. They operated under the assumption that the King's office was still functioning as a centralized, transparent hub. That assumption had become their biggest mistake. How did they miss it? The answer lies in the way the internal communication channels have been segmented. Over the last 6 months, the King has gradually restructured the palace's information flow. He has created silos where each household only sees the data relevant to their own work. The Queen's team no longer has access to the full inventory logs. They only see what the King's office decides they need to see. They were looking at a filtered version of reality. The Queen's chief of staff only found out by accident. He had been reviewing a list of storage fees for the archival department. He noticed a strange entry regarding an insurance premium adjustment for item number 402. He did not recognize the item. He made a routine inquiry to the archives manager. The manager, clearly nervous, told him that the item had been moved to the Princess of Wales's office on the King's direct order. The silence in the office when he hung up the phone was absolute. He realized then that they were no longer operating on equal footing. They had been kept in the dark while a major piece of royal history was reassigned. He spent the next hour calling his contacts in the registry department. Every one of them gave him the same answer. They were told it was a private matter and that no further questions were allowed. The done deal was indeed finished. This was a major escalation in the palace power struggle. It showed that the King was willing to use his executive power to override the established protocols. He was not just favoring Catherine. He was actively creating a new, secret layer of royal administration. He was moving assets around the board without telling the other players. The Queen's team realized they were playing a game where the rules were being rewritten in real time. The mystery that now haunts them is what else has been moved. If they could miss a silver casket, what other historical artifacts have been quietly transferred? They began a frantic back-channel audit of the entire collection. They are looking for holes in the record. They are trying to find where the rest of the treasure went. They are working in the dark, and every missing item they discover only deepens their sense of dread. The Queen's advisors felt a cold, sharp realization. They were not just losing the present, they were losing the record of the past. If Catherine holds the history, she controls the narrative. They were being relegated to the role of administrators of a shrinking influence. They were being phased out, one file at a time, and they had been too busy looking at their own spreadsheets to see it happening. The silence of the transfer was the loudest part of the whole operation. It sent a message to everyone in the palace that the old way of doing business was over. There would be no meetings to debate the move. There would be no compromise on the location of historical relics. The King had made a choice, and he had executed it with total quiet efficiency. The Queen's team is now trying to regain their balance, but they are fighting on ground that is shifting beneath them. They are now, for the first time, truly isolated. Camilla's reaction. The news reached Clarence House just before noon. A courier from the archives office delivered a formal, albeit brief, memo detailing the recent relocation of specific historical items. It did not mention the silver casket by name. It referred to it only as catalog reference number 402, but Camilla's senior private secretary knew the reference. He had seen it in the master ledger years ago. He walked into the Queen's private sitting room, his face pale. Camilla was reading a draft of her upcoming speech on rural community health. She looked up, sensing the shift in the room's air. She did not say a word as the secretary laid the memo on the table. She read the lines twice. Her reaction was not an outburst. She didn't shout. She didn't even drop her pen. She simply closed the folder and stared out the window for a long, heavy minute. The silence in the room became difficult to bear. The aide stood by the door, waiting for an order, a question, or even a sigh of frustration. They got nothing. Finally, Camilla turned back to the table. She asked one question. She wanted to know if the king had signed the order himself. When the secretary nodded, she simply asked for a cup of tea. It was a reaction that signaled deep, private defeat. Within the hour, the office erupted into chaos. The aides were not as composed as the queen. They were furious. They felt they had been deliberately excluded from the loop. They began making phone calls to contacts in the Treasury and the Registrar's office. They were looking for an official explanation. They were looking for someone to blame. They wanted to know why their department was not consulted on the movement of a high-value asset. The aides began to view the move as a targeted strike. They argued that if the item was historical, it belonged in a public collection where it could benefit the crown's image as a whole. Giving it to Catherine, in their view, was a calculated attempt to boost her status at the expense of the queen's own standing. They saw that private loan classification as a deliberate obfuscation to keep them from challenging the decision. This reaction is being viewed as desperate by courtiers in the main palace. When the story leaked to the press, the queen's aides were the ones quoted in the background, expressing their shock and confusion. This was a tactical error. It made them look like they were reacting to the king's decisions rather than shaping them. It projected an image of a team that had lost its influence. The more they complained, the less powerful they appeared. The mystery of the day was how Camilla would address the king. Would she confront him at dinner? Would she ask for a formal review of the archival transfer policy? The answer came that evening. She did not bring it up. She acted as if nothing had changed. This stoicism was meant to be a show of strength, but to her inner circle, it felt like she had simply given up the fight. The aides are now in a state of quiet despair. They see the writing on the wall. They know that if the king is willing to bypass the queen on matters of history, he is willing to do it on matters of policy as well. They have started to update their own professional networks. The morale in the office has hit an all-time low. They are no longer defending a legacy. They are just watching it be dismantled. The tension has moved beyond professional annoyance. It is now a full-blown crisis of confidence. The Queen's team feels abandoned. They are convinced that they are no longer the primary focus of the King's administration. They are seeing the future-proofing narrative in action, and they are terrified of what it means for their own jobs. They were supposed to be the gatekeepers of the Queen's influence. Now, they are just spectators. The scene in the office remains tense. Aides walk past each other without speaking. The phone lines are quiet. They have stopped trying to fight the decision. They are waiting to see what happens next. They know the casket is not the last item that will be found in the archives. They are bracing themselves for the next notification. They are no longer proactive. They are simply waiting for the end of an era they helped build. The Guardian of the Future narrative. The morning papers hit the stands with a unified theme. The Daily Telegraph ran a front-page feature showing Catherine standing beside a display of royal historical records. The headline was simple: The Guardian of the Legacy. It was the first time this specific title had been used in a national publication. The article inside argued that Catherine had become the primary custodian of the Windsor story. It claimed that her recent work in cultural preservation was a sign of a new, deliberate focus. This was not a coincidence. A draft of the press briefing had been circulated to the major media editors 48 hours before the release. It had come from Catherine's own communication team. They had carefully framed the discovery of the silver casket as part of a larger project. They called it the Heritage Initiative. The narrative was clear. Catherine was not just a royal performing duties. She was the architect of the monarchy's continuity. The Queen's team read the coverage in silence. It was a direct blow to their efforts to maintain the status quo. For years, they had relied on the Queen's own history to justify her position. They assumed that the person who lived through the longest reign was naturally the primary guardian of that history. Now, they saw that authority being claimed by the younger generation. The guardian title effectively made the Queen's own historical efforts look like personal hobbies rather than institutional duty. The shift was visible in how the public responded. On social media, fans began referring to Catherine as the keeper of the crown's jewels. It was an unofficial, organic development. It showed that the narrative had moved from the palace to the public consciousness. People were choosing who they wanted to represent their future, and the palace was simply confirming that choice. The Queen's team could not fight this. They could not argue with the public's own imagination. The internal tension at the palace is now centered on the word guardian. It is a heavy, loaded term. It implies that the previous generation has finished its work and that the next one has stepped up to protect what remains. The Queen's advisors hate the word. They view it as an insult to the work the Queen has done for decades. They see it as a clever bit of marketing meant to push her into the background. This brings up a new, pressing mystery. Who authorized the use of that title in the press briefing? The Royal Communication Office usually reviews all such descriptors. If they allowed Guardian of the Legacy to go through, it means they have been instructed to prioritize that language. It suggests the King's office has given a green light to a full-scale rebranding of the royal roles. It is no longer about balancing two women. It is about preparing the public for the next transition. Catherine's team is now acting with renewed confidence. They are scheduling more events that feature historical artifacts and archives. They are positioning her at the center of the monarchy's intellectual life. They are doing this without ever saying a negative word about the Queen. They don't have to. The narrative does the work for them. Every time Catherine is photographed with a piece of history, the contrast with the Queen becomes more pronounced. The Queen's team is struggling to find a response. They tried to highlight her own historical projects, but the editors told them they were not a priority for the current news cycle. They are realizing that the gates to the media have been locked. They are no longer the ones who get to decide what the public thinks is important. They are watching from the inside as their own influence is slowly, quietly reclassified as of the past. This is the reality of the new narrative. It is clean, it is modern, and it is entirely focused on the Princess of Wales. The Guardian title is a signal that the palace has moved on. The Queen's team is now the only one still living in the old world. The rest of the institution has committed to the future. They are being left behind by a process they have no power to influence. The narrative is set, and it is written in a language that does not include them. The King's strategic silence. The King sat at his desk in the afternoon sun. He was looking at a stack of documents from the Treasury. His private secretary entered the room. He walked softly, carrying a single envelope marked with the royal crest. The King did not look up immediately. He continued to read the report on the palace's annual maintenance costs. He seemed entirely unbothered by the growing friction between the two households. This is the King's primary weapon. He refuses to react. When the Queen's team asks for a private audience to complain about Catherine's latest initiative, he is unavailable. When Catherine's team asks for a formal endorsement of their plans, he offers a vague, non-committal smile. He has learned that silence in the palace is not empty. It is heavy. It forces everyone else to fill the space with their own anxiety. The courtiers have started to interpret this silence as an endorsement of the new direction. If the King were truly against the Guardian of the Legacy branding, he would have issued a simple order to stop it. He has not. He allows the stories to run in the press. He allows the narrative of Catherine's ascendancy to take root. His lack of intervention is being read as a quiet, definitive choice. The mystery that drives the staff to madness is whether the King has a plan at all. Is this a grand design to phase out the old guard? Or is he just a man who hates conflict so much that he would rather watch his house burn than pick up a bucket of water? The courtiers are split. Some think he is a master tactician playing a long game. Others think he is simply a tired monarch hoping the problem will solve itself. The Queen's advisors tried to force his hand last week. They sent a detailed memo outlining the risks of fragmenting the royal brand. They hoped for a response that would clarify his position. They received a single-sentence reply from his secretary. His Majesty is aware of the concerns and appreciates the team's ongoing dedication. It was a classic brush-off. It told them nothing, and it gave them no room to argue. This silence has created a vacuum. Because the King will not lead the discussion, the teams are doing it for him. They are fighting in the newspapers, on social media, and in the private halls of the palace. They are acting as his proxies, whether he wants them to or not. The King's refusal to speak has effectively outsourced the management of his family to the very people who are most interested in the outcome. The result is a monarchy that feels rudderless, even while it moves at high speed toward change. There is no central authority setting the pace. There are just two teams racing to see who can get the king's attention first. The staff members are exhausted. They are burning out because they never know if they are following the king's will or just the whims of their own factional interests. There is another question now. What happens if the king eventually decides to speak? If he breaks his silence to support one side over the other, the fallout will be immediate. But as long as he stays quiet, the status quo is essentially the slow-motion collapse of the old order. The king knows this. He is a man of history. He knows that silence can be just as powerful as a decree. He is letting the tide turn on its own. The tension in the study is always high. When the king eventually finishes his paperwork, he goes to the window. He looks out over the gardens. He sees the staff moving about their work. He knows the friction they feel. He just does not see the need to fix it. He is waiting for the dust to settle. He believes that the strongest version of the monarchy will emerge from the chaos of this transition. He is not trying to manage the conflict. He is letting it exist. He sees it as the necessary heat of a forge. If the new direction is truly the right one, it will survive the pressure of the Queen's resistance. If it is not, it will fail. He is comfortable with either outcome. He is the only person in the room who is not afraid of the silence. He is the only one who is not trying to fill it with a desperate argument. The unspoken challenge. The summer garden party was set for the following Tuesday. The sun beat down on the palace grounds, turning the grass a bright, dry yellow. Thousands of guests lined the gravel paths, waiting for the senior royals to emerge from the terrace doors. The atmosphere was tight. It was the first time the Queen and the Princess of Wales would appear together since the transfer of the silver casket became common knowledge within the court. Catherine stepped out first. She wore a cream-colored coat dress that felt modern and sharp against the backdrop of the old stone walls. She walked with a steady, measured pace. She stopped to speak with a group of veterans near the edge of the path. She looked composed. She looked like someone who knew exactly where she was going and why she was there. The guests were looking for one thing. Every eye in the crowd was scanning her person. They wanted to see if she had chosen to wear the casket. It was not a piece of jewelry meant for daily use, but it had become the symbol of the week. If she wore it, it would be a public declaration. It would be a final, irreversible mark that she had inherited the mantle of the late Queen. The Queen followed a few minutes later. She walked behind the king, keeping a respectful distance. She wore a soft floral print that felt more traditional, more like the look of the older generation. She was smiling, but her eyes kept returning to the princess. She was watching for the same thing the crowd was watching for. The tension in the air was thick enough to feel. Catherine was not wearing the casket. It was not hanging from her waist, and it was not part of her accessories. She had left it in the office. It was a calculated move. She understood that wearing the relic would be an aggressive act. By leaving it behind, she maintained the power of possession without the friction of a public display. She was playing a game of patience, and she was winning. The mystery that resolved itself that afternoon was whether Catherine would yield to the pressure of the moment. Many had expected her to be defensive or overly cautious given the recent press focus. Instead, she was calm. She spoke to the crowd with a natural warmth that made the Queen's own interactions look practiced. She didn't need to wear the history to be the center of it. Her presence alone had become the main event. The Queen's team watched from the side of the lawn. They saw the way the crowd leaned toward Catherine. They saw the way the cameras never left her. They realized that the physical relic in the safe was not the real power. The power was the way the public saw her. They were already treating her as the Queen in waiting, and there was nothing the Queen's team could do to change that. A new challenge opened before the afternoon was over. The king approached Catherine and whispered something in her ear. She nodded, and they moved together toward the private tea tent, leaving the Queen behind to finish the walk alone. It was a public separation. It was a visual cue that the partnership of the monarchy had shifted. The king had chosen his path, and the Queen was being left to handle the consequences of the change. The Queen stopped walking for a moment. She adjusted her hat, then signaled to one of her aides. She looked tired. She realized that the unspoken challenge of the afternoon had been lost before she even arrived. The institution had already moved on. The garden party was supposed to be a return to normalcy, but it was anything but normal. It was the site of a quiet, brutal realization. The guests left the grounds under a darkening sky. They talked about the beauty of the gardens and the heat of the day, but they also talked about the distance between the two women. They talked about the king's decision to move on without his wife by his side. The palace was no longer a home for a family. It was the theater of a transition that was happening in plain sight. The challenge had been issued, and it had been won. The silver casket discovery was not just historical, it was a catalyst. By silently shifting this symbol of the late Queen into Catherine's hands, the king has signaled that the future of the monarchy now rests with the Princess of Wales. The palace is no longer a unified house. It is a stage for a quiet, irreversible transition. Is Catherine the right steward for the Windsor legacy, or is the king forcing this change too quickly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe and hit the bell to track every turn in this unfolding royal power struggle. Stay tuned.